that there is accessible or inclusive tourism, not only in the Caribbean, but around the world. I want to know, what is your ministry doing to ensure that persons with disabilities are given the opportunity to be part of this touristic drive, with reference to the access to Braille at hotels, the ability to have wheelchair access, rooms that are accessible for persons with disabilities, bathrooms, etc. I just want to know if your ministry is indeed aware, and what are you doing to ensure that we align with those agreements internationally that we sign on to, and in principle, based on our policy, aligns with our national trust to have an inclusive society. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Before I ask Ms. Lana Harewood to speak to us, who's the manager of the Product Quality Unit, I will offer a few words. As you are well aware, there is the provision for universal access. There are indeed a number of hotels in Barbados, in accordance with their brand standards, that must have accessible rooms. Accessible rooms also would include bathrooms and other facilities and amenities in order for those persons with disabilities to access the guest rooms. It is an established standard, like I said, with major hotels, especially those who are branded hotels across the world. In Barbados, we have some of those branded properties, and we also have properties in Barbados who have allocated a given number of rooms for universal access, or what we refer to as disability access. Those hotels predominantly will have rooms on the ground floor, and where possible, where there's an elevator, they would have them above ground. This is also one of the conditions that we are now preparing as we present the tourist accommodation bill, to ensure that a given percentage of rooms be allocated to or be made available for the disabled. This is something that is not unique to Barbados, and certainly hoteliers in Barbados, and I must commend them, they have allocated the appropriate number of rooms for access. And they also, I can tell you, when they're marketing the destination.
Honourable Minister, you would need to either speak into the voice, the mic more.
Oh, my apologies. Now, I was making the point that we have a number of rooms in Barbados allocated for universal access. Certainly, hoteliers in Barbados continue, whenever they build in new infrastructure, adding new rooms, to add rooms for the disabled. As part of the tourist accommodation bill, we also made provision for a given number. Not that every hotel must make rooms available, but based on a ratio, we're seeking to build that into that legislation. There are also branded hotels on the island who, in accordance with their brand standards, must have a defined number of rooms available for the disabled. But what I would like to do now is to ask Ms. Lana Harewood, who's the manager of the Product Quality Unit, to further advance her comments on this particular matter. Ms. Harewood.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Minister, for your question. As the Minister would have indicated, the new proposed tourist accommodation bill does make provision for universal access. It indicates that those accommodations that are built or renovated after the commencement of the Act shall be universally accessible. However, you should note that there is a provision for exceptions in the case where the topography of the land, for instance, doesn't merit that, or if it is a United Nations educational scientific, cultural organization, World Heritage Site. So there's certain exemptions that, depending on the property, the layout of the property, they can ask for exemption, apply for an exemption through the minister, depending on the property itself. But provisions have been made for universal access in going forward.
And what, just to follow up, and what that also means, Minister, that the regulations that would accompany the tourist accommodation bill will set out the ratio of rooms for universal access. Currently in Barbados, there are some hotels with maybe 100 rooms and they may allocate 5, 10 rooms. So it's not to say that we don't have rooms with universal access, we do have. But what we'll be setting out to do is within the tourist, within that, the bill to come, the tourist accommodation bill, will be to set up the minimum standards with respect to universal access.
Thank you, Minister, and I'm sure that over 30,000 persons in Barbados who fall into this category will be looking forward for this bill and will be definitely supporting it when it does come to fruition. Thank you, and that's all I have to ask for this time.
Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to have to ask these in different rounds because there's not necessarily the connection between them all. I am very pleased with the work of the ministry, the minister, his permanent secretary, who identifies separately, and the rest of the team, because I understand and I've seen how they operate. One of the things that has pleased those who sent me to this place is the start of cruise calls at the Spikestown Jetty. I'd like, on behalf of those who I represent and who want to hear, what are the plans for, well, if there are any, for expanding that. I've had conversations with the minister on that before, but I think in this forum, it would be useful for those from St. Peter who are listening, well, from the north generally, including those from St. Lucie, because a lot of the tours emanating from those cruise calls go through St. Lucie as well. They would want to hear from the ministry, minister and officials, what are the plans for developing that, if there are plans for increasing the number of calls, the number of vessels, that kind of thing that will tell us how that product is being built out in the north.
Thank you, Honourable Member. What we are experiencing in Barbados, based on the number of cruise ships that are calling, is the smaller luxury ships and yachts who are coming to Barbados. They're asking us for the ability to berth elsewhere. Of course, as you rightly identified, Spikestown has benefited from more than one cruise call. We are currently working with the smaller, what we consider the yachts and others to facilitate, including the port agents in Barbados, to build out additional, not only capacity, but to ensure we can have more cruise calls there. For us, the cruise companies, especially those who operate smaller vessels, have asked us to look at the expansion of that area. It is something that we are working on. I can't go into any greater details at this time. Suffice to say, Honourable Member, that we will continue to work with the cruise lines to build out additional cruise calls at Spikestown. When we go to see trade, either Europe or the USA, it is a conversation that we have. Currently, we have significant demand for additional cruise calls in Barbados. And as a result of the additional...
I'm not hearing you over this. interruption.
So what I'm, sorry, prior to the interruption, was making the point that whenever we go to Sea Trade Europe or Sea Trade USA, we often get expressions of interest for smaller port facilities, and therefore we will continue to work with the port agents as well as the cruise lines to build out additional cruise call capacity for St. Peter. What I would like to do as well is to ask the CEO of the Barbados Port Inc., Mr. John Murray, to add additional comments with respect to the facility at Speightstown. But as you're well aware, Honourable Member, when you come into Speightstown, we have to do a tender arrangement. That is, a smaller vessel will go meet the cruise ship and obviously transport them. But the good thing about that, and based on the experience that we've had, is that when the vessels go in to Speightstown, we're creating opportunities for the area, for the community, and certainly for the residents. And as a result of that, I am aware that there are companies who've already built out tours for the St. Peter, Speightstown area, and certainly for the north of Barbados. I'll pause and I'll ask the CEO of the Barbados Port Inc., Mr. John Murray, to comment further.
Not much more I can add to your comment, Minister. As you said, we will continue to discuss with the smaller cruise lines when we go on the tours of the possibility of using Speightstown. The agent is actively also working with us and the smaller cruise lines. They do not wish to be, some of them don't wish to be in the Bridgetown port with the mega ships, and they've indicated a preference for Speightstown. We have built out the 4 moorings at Speightstown. We've improved the jetty significantly. We have put all logistics in place. This season, there were to be 5 calls by the Honourable Sakara. 3 actually took place. 2 were cancelled because of swell conditions. But we will continue to actively work to have more business to the north of the country.
Thank you very much. A follow-up, Mr. Chair. You spoke about the jetty, and I must say that we continue to be very happy about the work that the Barbados Port Inc. did to ensure that we had a refurbished jetty. A question I want to ask based on that, and based on something I heard the Honourable Minister say, are there any facilities that the cruise operators are asking for in Speightstown that we do not currently have? I'm asking that obviously because I have a substantial amount of interest as a Member of Parliament, so that if there is need to lobby in any quarter, I'd like to know up front. So are there any facilities that the liners would like to have? I know you have, I think, 2 moorings. My recollection, you have 4, or you are going to have 4. I thought that there were still some others to be placed. But outside of moorings, you can comment on the moorings, but outside of the moorings, any other facilities that the cruise operators are asking for?
Thank you, Minister. I'm not aware. I know oftentimes cruise ships don't like the tender arrangement, but in the case where we've had the calls, especially from the smaller vessels, they have not presented that to us as a difficulty. The difficulty becomes when there's significant sea swells in the area, and therefore the passengers are unable to to get to shore, or they would prefer not to have them use the tender to come to shore. But I'll ask the CEO of the Barbados Port Inc. if he's aware of any other such facilities that the cruise operators are asking for that we currently don't have. Mr. John Murray?
Thank you, Minister. No, I'm not aware. No additional requests have come to the port. We do have 2 moorings there, and which are quite adequate. But as demand develops, we are willing to add more. But no additional requests have come from the cruise lines or its agent. We will, however, based on your question, raise the matter with the cruise agent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll ask my next question in the next round.
Honourable Member for St. John.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, I have 3 questions. Chair, they're all related to flights, so they're connected, sir. The first question, Minister, is in relation to the TAG flights out of the UK. Can you speak to the success rate of those flights?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Yes, we have the TAG flights in operation, and they are doing well. I will ask either the CEO or the COO of the BTMI to speak to it. What I can tell you, and certainly within the last 2 years, we've been able to secure 2 transatlantic flights during the winter, both operated by Virgin and British Airways. Those flights have contributed significantly to Barbados's tourist arrivals. We continue on the TAG flights to retain at least 65%. But what is also done for us what those flights have also done for us is has allowed us to bring even more visitors from the UK to Barbados. In fact, it's the first time in the history of Barbados that we would have had 2 transatlantic flights coming to Barbados in the winter season. And we are going to build on that. We are currently in discussions to see if we can increase the number of flights coming out to the United Kingdom. And therefore, in this case, where Virgin has the TAG flights onto St. Vincent and Grenada, we are very pleased that we were able to secure those, and we maintain at least 65% of the seats on the TAG flight. And now, let me also make the point that based on the 2 flights that come in daily into Barbados during the winter, that they're not both TAG flights, only one that comes into Barbados to be TAG. I'll ask the CEO and the CO if they wish to comment as well on the TAG flights. CEO?
Thank you, Minister. The only thing I would also add to the issue with the TAG flights, yes, Barbados still maintains about 65% of that load, but also it creates the opportunity for additional capacity within the Caribbean, as these services are allowed to sell between Barbados, Grenada, Barbados, St. Vincent. So it does increase our seat capacity for intra-Caribbean travel as well, which is also contributing to the growth of the Caribbean market as well. Sorry, yeah, that's the only thing to add on that point.
Thank you. My next question, Honourable Minister, is in relation to new markets for the new financial year. Can you state what new markets you will be looking at for the new financial year?
Thank you, Honourable Member. I'm happy you asked that question because it is a very good question. As we continue, the only way we can continue to grow Barbados' tourism is to seek out new and emerging markets. And as a strategy and as a policy position, the ministry is taking the view that we need to go into additional markets. We've therefore taken the policy decision to be executed and implemented by the BTMI to go into Africa and the Gulf states, combine that as one market at this point in time, and then to go into Asia and the Pacific market. If you look at global statistics, certainly UN tourism statistics, you will see that both Asia and the Pacific continue to represent very strong growth globally into other markets. And we are working at a pace. We've already have both policies developed. They're yet to be submitted to one has been submitted, and I'm waiting for the follow-up document on the Asia Pacific market. Once those documents are submitted, we will then take it to the cabinet for formal notification. But we believe that if we continue to grow and build out the Asia Pacific market as well as the Africa and Gulf states, that would present a wonderful growth opportunity for Barbados, particularly in Barbados, where the government has pretty much almost a visa-free travel hassle and visa-free arrangements coming into Barbados. I think it's a great opportunity for us. If you take, for example, the Gulf states, when they travel with their families, and oftentimes not having to go through maybe the UK or United States, it presents a wonderful opportunity for us to sustain that market. The same applies to Africa, and and also within the Asia Pacific region, where there's no real requirement for visa access into Barbados, albeit a couple. It's another opportunity for us to grow our tourism sector. So we are going to be going full steam ahead in the forthcoming financial year to grow. There has to be a presence in the market. The presence in the market is to create the awareness that is needed. And once we get the awareness, then we move in to a lot of what we call the detailed positioning of the market in order for us then to generate additional seat capacity. It will take us some time to develop both markets. It took us, for example, when we went into Latin America, it took us not so long to develop market, and as a result of that, we got flights coming into Barbados. And if we want to build out international connections, certainly between Dallas and Chicago, specifically deal with a lot of the flights that come in from Asia to Pacific and elsewhere, it is an opportunity for us to strengthen that market. So we will be going into those two new markets, and those new markets, we believe, based on all the data that we have available, based on all the UN statistics, we are well positioned to derive growth over time. But I make the point, it will not happen overnight. It takes some time to grow the market. But the good thing about Barbados is that when we go into the market, we position ourselves in the market, that we have the officers who support us and who can obviously execute the strategy in the market for us to generate additional growth. Thank you.
Based on your track record, Minister, I know that we will reap the bounty at the end of all of this. My final question, Chair, is in relation to the Middle East. I mean, the world is watching. How are you dealing with the impact or fallout as it relates to the war in the Middle East? I yield back, Chair.
Thank you very much. It is a situation that we will be monitoring. Of course, associated with aircraft, a major component is fuel. We have to monitor, obviously, the price of oil. If it becomes, and if it gets out of control, obviously there will be a attendant increase in airfares. Whenever there's an attendant increase in airfares, it means therefore that travel sentiment or travel demand could slump. But I'm confident that as we continue but I'm confident as we continue to monitor the situation that we will, of course, position ourselves to ensure that we have minimal impact from any potential disruption. The Caribbean remains a very safe place, and I think it's also an opportunity for the Caribbean, once we position ourselves well, to benefit, not because of what's happening in the Middle East, but also an opportunity for us to increase passenger traffic that would have otherwise gone to other destinations. Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Philip West. Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In a similar vein for the questions that I asked about the airport, I'm going to switch to the other port now, the Bridgetown port, and ask similar questions in terms of what expansion programs that you have in train. Of course, we heard clearly and we've seen the expansion in the number of cruise ships that are coming to Barbados. We've also seen the berth 6, and we'd want to discuss all things related to the port, as well as the repairs to the fishing complex, as all things related to the port. But let's start with the, I think we should start really with the repairs to the fishing complex. What progress have you made there, and when do you expect completion so that we could have that facility ready for fishermen again?
Thank you, Honourable Member. I will ask the CEO of the Barbados Port Inc., Mr. John Marie, to comment. But before he takes the microphone, I think it's important to recognize that Barbados continues to grow and build out its cruise infrastructure as well as part of the Bridgetown Port expansion. You recall that berth 6 has been completed. We are currently receiving cargo vessels there and also some cruise ship vessels. We've always been plagued with the problem prior to berth 6 in Barbados, where there's always competition for cruise ships and cargo ships to come in to dock and to obviously utilize the berthing space. Of course, as we continue to build out our cruise facilities, attention will have to be given now to the expansion of a finger pier or 2 at the Bridgetown port. This is absolutely necessary based on the demand that we are seeing, and the number of requests that we are getting, from the cruise operators. So I will ask the CEO of the Barbados Port Inc., Mr. John Marie, to comment before I come back.
Thank you, Minister. The berth 6 project is a cargo berth. It is a 315 meters long berth, currently 11 meters in depth. Eventually will be dredged to 13 meters. It is about 90% completed with 2 new electric gantry cranes. 65% of the reclaimed land has been paved. The total area to be paved is 6.3 acres. Eventually, that space will be configured for what we call a rubber-tired gantry operation to increase the density, the capacity of the port in the area where that refers to how containers are actually stored. That project is, as I said, it's fairly well advanced. It is primarily intended for cargo, as there were many complaints with respect to, as the Minister said, conflicts between cargo and cruise. However, it has been used for all types of ships. It's been used for grain ships. It's been used for sand ships. It's currently being used at this present moment to discharge a vehicle carrier, and it's also being used for container vessels. So it's been very useful to us, particularly during this time of year where we have all the increased activity with the cruise ships. The shallow draft marina, that's 99% complete. It's just awaiting naming approvals. That has given us an additional 70 new yacht berths. We have a ro-ro berth where the inter-island schooner, which comes every week bringing fruit from St. Vincent and docks. We also have in that area a fish market facility for the sandpit fishermen. There's been commercial buildings, and there is also a fuel dock and a fuel station. It's all tenanted. The entire thing is tenanted. So we are quite pleased about that. That was a $40 million Barbados project. The cargo freight station and central container examination facility is one that we also has all the planning permission. This is one in which the central examination facility is where we want to see all containers coming into Barbados, rather than going out to consign these locations and then for all the regulatory agencies, the customs and so on to go to inspect. That all that's done within the port. So we want to have a central examination facility for that purpose. All the design work has been completed. We're relooking the location for that project because it was a $40 million project. We're looking to utilize the existing shallow draft shed as that is not in use currently, and therefore reduce substantially the cost of completing this project. The aggregate berth project, again, design, all permissions granted. This is a project intended to reclaim substantial quantity of lands to the north of the existing flour mill in order for us to facilitate the discharge of sand, aggregate, boulders, and so on. Currently, that's being done adjacent to the flour mill. And this is not really adequate. The intention there is for us to build up this aggregate berth where sand, as we all know, is being imported into the country. There's no sand here now, or hardly any. So there's sand barges that come here almost weekly, bringing sand for all the construction projects that are ongoing. This is a $90 million project, but we are currently also examining the possibility of having such a facility at Arawak. Although we believe in the port that we will need both because the port needs space. We have within this month alone, there's 4 vehicle carriers, 2 today, 1 on the 18th, 1 on the 31st, bringing 1,000 vehicles into Barbados. And that creates a dilemma for us in terms of storage on the terminal. So we really need to find adequate storage space nearby. The idea, of course, is to have the agencies clear those cars as quickly as possible, but that's a work in progress. But in the meantime, that creates a bit of congestion for us at the port. The boat haul-up facility, the intention is to have a facility where boat repairs will be conducted, and you can't do that until we've relocated or built out an aggregate facility, because that's space allocated for such a facility. That's a $12 million facility. There's some restoration projects that are ongoing. The bulk facility called the flour mill dock that was damaged by a legion. A ship struck that with severe swell conditions and damaged the dock. It's being repaired at present. The breakwater, which joins the arm, which is critical to our cruise vessels and our cruise business, that was damaged during Beryl. Discovered a number of months later, that's under repair currently. And of course, the molasses tanks, we also have to see how we can use those possibly for water storage and so on. With respect to the fisheries breakwater, Barbados Port, we were asked to be the project manager for that project and to get it done quickly. The arm was finished, the project was completed on the 20th of February, so it's fully functional. There are additional works to be undertaken at the fisheries complex, but that's under the purview of the fisheries division.
Thank you, Mr. John Marie, for that extensive list. However, it didn't really tell me a little bit about how far along you are, especially with the aggregate berth, because you would appreciate that the aggregate berth is critical to the development of all of Barbados, to be able to get aggregate landed safely and appropriately. And I do agree with you, it's not appropriate to have it have sand landing next to the flour mill. So have you actually awarded a contract? Are you in the process of going out to tender? How will it be paid? Do you have any information as to that side of things?
Mr. David Jomri.
The aggregate berth has been designed working with a single contractor, single source here in Barbados. The problem is not with its current configuration and the volumes of aggregate being projected to pass through the facility, it is not financially feasible. So we're still exploring ways and means of how we can build up the berth. Part of the problem is that it needs an arm to protect the port from all the swell activity that takes place. That arm is about 40% of the cost of the project. So we're still working with the developers, potential developers. We've had different entities come to us. We work with potential developers to see how we can come up with a project that is viable. But as I said earlier, in the meantime, we're also exploring RWAC as an option for such a facility.
And the last question, in the same way that the airport is making a better facility for the passengers, can you expand on what you're going to do at the seaport to make it better for those cruise terminal passengers? Right now, the terminal is a retrofit. Are you are prepared to build a purpose-built kind of terminal to receive people who are passengers coming through the terminal?
Indeed, we have been examining a few options with respect to building other cruise facilities. We have enhanced, in terms of the existing facilities, we've enhanced the home port terminal. So we have a luxury section there for home port passengers. We continue to work on improving the existing terminal, and it actually works. But we want to move towards separating cargo from cruise, and we are indeed having a discussion with the cruise lines, the major cruise lines, MSC, Royal Caribbean, Carnival, to see how they can participate as investors in the build-out of a purpose-built facility to the south of the existing terminal. The current configuration that we're looking at is reclamation of 5 acres of land, 1 pier initially, and a terminal. So we continue to have those conversations with the cruise lines and other entities that have expressed an interest to see how we can accelerate coming up with a plan as quickly as possible to be able to build out facilities for the cruise passengers.
Thank you very much, Minister and Mr. Montgomery. Clearly, these are very, very important areas necessary for the development of this country. And I salute you, Minister, and continue to work on these as we continue to build out Barbados and make it better. Mr. Chairman, I yield back to you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member for St. Michael Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. I want to start off first by joining my colleagues and saying congratulations to the Ministry for doing such excellent work. The Ministry of Tourism has a personal touch to my life because it's what fed me, it's what got me through school and early stages. So I do have a personal appreciation for what the ministry does and what tourism does for this country. My question is on behalf of course, the constituents of St. Michael Central. I would have posed this question to the Minister of Housing in relation to the Glenderry Prison, and he did inform me that it has been recently handed over to BTMI. So therefore, I'm asking the ministry, what plans do you have? And I did hear briefly, there's plans for a museum, but I would like some more detail in terms of timelines, exactly what we're looking at, you know, if there are going to be any job opportunities for my constituents. That type of information is what I'd be looking for. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I believe it's not the BTMI, but the BTII. And there's a difference in terms, the BTMI is the promotional marketing, as you know, and the BTII is the one who does a lot of the investment programs. So I believe that that question would best be answered by the BTII. It doesn't form part of my portfolio responsibilities. It falls under, I believe, public and private sector investment. The ministry is responsible for public and private sector investment. Suffice it to say, like It's always heartening to hear people who've come through and been a product, not only because of assistance or otherwise from the tourism sector, but it's a story that we share and we share constantly. And I'm always very happy and pleased when others share the story. I do support an opportunity for the Glengarry prison to form part of an attraction in Barbados. It certainly will not only benefit your constituents in terms of opportunities not only for direct employment, but also for entrepreneurial initiatives and other avenues that they will wish to pursue on an entrepreneurial basis. But I also believe as we continue to build our attractions in Barbados, that could be a very good attraction for all and add to the attractions listing. So I will say that we will wait when the formal plans have been prepared and all the necessary arrangements are put in place for the building out of that facility as an attraction.
Thank you, Minister, for that clarification. I yield back.
Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honourable Minister, let me begin by adding my own voice of congratulations to you and your team for the very excellent work that is being done. Minister, I concede that I try not to involve myself in questioning those ministers who fall under that grouping that is called the productive sector, for which I have some degree of responsibility. But I do feel that I should give you the opportunity to speak a little bit at a policy level on a few things. Two things, really. The first one is the question of the carrying capacity of this country with respect to the substantial projected number of tourists that are likely to be coming here long stay. Obviously, the investments that we are making, and there are several of them, both ongoing now and still to be unfolded, will lead to more and more tourists coming on island. So I feel that in the context of the increased number of visitors, I would like to hear from you what your thinking is in terms of the carrying capacity of the country. And perhaps as you do so, it would be a good thing if you would be so good as to speak a little bit to the Barbados Hilton, which is obviously, I suppose you could describe it as the government's investment, the government's flagship, and the capacity of the Hilton itself, and whether or not that is a property that is in need of expansion.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. The Permanent Secretary has done a lot of work with respect of the carrying capacity. And as you know, my style is to always give those officers who work with me an opportunity to speak and speak freely and frankly. Of course, I do agree and take the point that Barbados must always be in a position to ensure that we have the carrying capacity to support the number of projects, particularly those within the hospitality sector that we have coming on board. We've gone on record before as making the point that we will have, by 2031, at least 1,600 hotel rooms coming on stream. When you have that volume of rooms coming on stream, it also speaks to, can we accommodate them and what are the resources that we have to do so? Let's take the approach from the Grand Liams International Airport. The government has committed to spending $120 million on an airport expansion project. That project is intended to ensure that we can not only service the increased number of passengers that we have coming into Barbados, but that we can also facilitate their through through the airport in such a manner that will not necessarily cause passenger discomfort and certainly customer complaints. The follow-up issue to that would obviously to ask whether or not we will have the staff in order to support the number of rooms that we have. Of course, we've heard today that there's the Hospitality Gateway project. The National Transformation Initiative is also working. And I'm aware that also within the BHD, they also have a number of training programs to onboard people who are interested within the sector. Then it comes to the utilities with respect to water and electricity. And certainly as we go further north in terms of developments that we have coming on stream, obviously the desalination plant that we currently have at Spring Garden will help us, but also the country will have to look to see if there are other desalination plants in the north of the island that would be required in order to satisfy the demand. The good thing or the fortunate thing for us is that not all of the hotels are coming on stream at one time. There's obviously a gradual. You would have seen, for example, Hotel Indigo that came on board and is now fully open, catering to 128, it has 128 rooms catering to guests. Then you have the Blue Monkey property, the Green Monkey, sorry. Blue Monkey, yeah, mix up. The Blue Monkey property coming on stream. They will have 28 suites, and then we'll have the Royalton property coming on stream with over 200 rooms in June. It does not present any pressure in terms of utilities at this stage, but because of the planning that we have in place, I do not foresee that we will have any significant challenges with Barbados' carrying capacity with respect to the infrastructure and also the resources and utilities needed to ensure that we have those additional rooms on island. It's a good thing and a good success story for a country that is dependent on tourism to see the number of new hotel investments coming on stream. We have, when I last looked at the investment table, you're looking at approximately over $1 billion Barbados dollars in investment within the plant. And when you have persons as in the form of investors coming to your country and making that substantial investment, it not only speaks to the confidence, but it also speaks to the brand that Barbados continues to be that very strong brand, and representative of that brand is its people at the core of it. And therefore, I believe we will not have any major challenges associated with our carrying capacity. I will ask the Permanent Secretary if she wishes to comment any further. Permanent Secretary.
Thank you, Minister. The study, Senior Minister Simmons, had reflected that I think the equilibrium number, if I remember correctly, was about 14,000 visitors per day before you start to see any degradation of the services. So with that in mind, we are trying to make sure that we keep the conversation going, certainly with our partners. Minister spoke to the build out of the accommodation and how that is going. And certainly, of course, there is usually a conversation with the utility in Barbados in order to be able to supply the demand. And thus far, we have not had any challenges, and we will continue to monitor this along with the service providers to make sure that we do not, or we minimize the potential destabilization of the infrastructure. So,
and if I may follow up, sorry, your question with respect to the Barbados Hilton? Mm-hmm. Right. Of course, we do have capacity. I will ask Ms. Debbie Hughes to also speak on the matter of the Barbados Hilton. But what I can tell you, that the Hilton is performing extremely well. But Ms. Hughes will certainly give you more details. What I can also tell you and tell Barbados, that the Hilton is debt-free. Debt-free. And that is a wonderful accomplishment for a country. You recall it's the Barbados Labour Party administration that imploded, and there was a lot of comment and controversy at the time. But having done so, having rebuilt the property, having the property perform as well as it has done, and to the shareholders' credit, the property is now debt-free. And if I am not mistaken, the last property valuation that I'm aware of is that the Hilton is valued in excess of $240 million, Barbados dollars. So I think that's a wonderful accomplishment, not only for this Barbados Labour Party government, but for the people of Barbados. And yes, we need further expansion there. And when you have a property that's debt-free, you have a number of opportunities that you can leverage the asset in order to grow capacity there. Based on the occupancy rates, I'm sure that they will like to have some additional rooms. But I'll ask Ms. Debbie Hughes, CEO of Needham's Point Holding Limited, to comment further. Ms. Hughes?
Thank you, Minister. Deborah Hughes, CEO of Needham's Point Holdings Limited. With respect to the Hilton Barbados Resort, which is our chief source of revenue at MPHL, since COVID, the hotel has performed extremely well. We actually went from a position of loss in 2022 to a very good profit in 2025. Our revenues have increased over that same period by 108%. Our occupancy is 81 or so percent, which is, in our competitive set, is probably the best of similar hotels that we compare ourselves to. And our ADR has increased by 41%. So we have seen, we don't have any debt. Our board took the decision to retire our debt early, which has resulted in interest saving of about $3.5 million. So we are now in a position to use that cash flow to start to improve the public areas of the hotel. As you may appreciate, the hotel is about 20 years old, and we've already done all of the guest rooms. We've also, last year through to this year, we did a complete refurbishment of the ballroom and meeting rooms, but areas like the lobby and the pool deck and the Lighthouse restaurant, they're all slated for refurbishment over the next year or two. So we are very happy with the way that the hotel is operating. I should take this opportunity, I think, to congratulate the revenue management and marketing team at the hotel. I think they're doing an excellent job.
And if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was the first time in the history of the Hilton that they paid a dividend, but I stand corrected if I'm wrong.
I believe that you are right, Minister, and I too would want to lend some words of congratulations to your team, especially those at Needham's Point, for taking the hotel to this obvious point of successful performance. And with respect then to the question of the carrying capacity, PS, I think you're on the right track. There have been places in the world, not the least of which that come to mind, Barcelona, and I believe also Italy. A couple of the Italian cities have had a phenomenon which has come to be known as over-tourism. And we have to be mindful not only of the hotel investment, but also the shared accommodation sector, because there came a time in both of those parts of the world where the so-called shared accommodation, Airbnb and Vrbo, etc., then started to compete with the available rental pool in the country. And then that starts an us versus them kind of thing, which we have to be careful that we plan around. Mr. Chairman, if I could just ask one last question then, because I think I was allowed 3, and depending on how you count, I've had 1 or 2. But my question really simply would be this. This is really now, Minister, on the question of what is the seasonality, or has been seen as the curse of seasonality in our tourism sector. I know you have strong views on it, and again, I would like you to be able to say a few words as a policy statement on it because we have to focus on mitigating the impacts of seasonality in terms of employment in particular. In terms of defending our market share, we have to be innovative and we have to be diversified, and experiences must be diversified. And so therefore, what I'm inviting you to speak to really is the question of the role of product development and the need that you may see for there to be policy intervention in order to ensure that we continue to revise and to improve upon the product that Barbados offers.
Thank you, Honourable Member. And I do agree with you with respect to product. We have to continue to not only have the incentives and concessions available for hotels and generally tourism products to improve. Based on Barbados's rate structure for hotel rooms, it is important that we offer a product that is not only conducive to the very location that we offer, but is also competitive. If we fail on our competitiveness, then the country will not receive further benefits from the tourism sector. Product development is absolutely critical. And I've always said to those within the ministry that to avoid a product trap, that we have to ensure that our product is brought up to speed. I am very pleased with not only the new accommodation that's coming on stream, I'm also very pleased with the services that are being offered. The one thing that we have to pay critical attention to, and particularly as we go into the Latin American market, is that we now have to ensure that our food and beverage outlets go beyond our traditional 10 or 9:30 opening, and certainly maybe a 9 o'clock last order regime. If we are going to expand and we are going to grow tourism, that is a part of the product that we have to address. The ability for persons to probably eat a bit later and also have the opportunity to dine later. And that is a defining moment for us. I intend to have further discussions with the Barbados Hotel Association and all other stakeholders to ensure that we can actually move in that direction. You would have seen the incentives, for example, that we've provided for restaurants and bars to help them even become more competitive. We also have them within the hotel structure. But we really now need to have the product moved in the direction that will certainly sustain the growth that we're looking for. If there are other islands who will offer a range of products beyond a certain time and we are not there, then we will fall behind and we will become uncompetitive. With respect to seasonality, I believe certainly that within the last 2 to 3 years, you will see a shift. Before, we would not have aircraft flying in here and going beyond a certain date. There was once a view held that the tourism season ended April 15th. I'm pleased to report that we have seen now, based on the evidence coming forward in the data, that there's a shift. We will work to build out our seasonality. Of course, September and October, those 2 months remain a challenge. And of course, because oftentimes we are regrettably in a hurricane season, that there's some of the operators who will be hesitant in selling Barbados. But I believe that we are gradually turning the corner, and that is why the new market and new emerging market initiatives that we're pursuing, I believe, would help us. For example, in the Gulf, it is very, very hot during the summer, certainly hotter than Barbados, and they go elsewhere to vacation. If we can get some of those persons to visit Barbados, and they will come for multiple reasons, that will be a plus for destination Barbados. The same thing applies to other countries where climatic conditions are opposite to us, where we can yield them here. And as long as we can continue with our emerging market strategy, and as long as we can pursue the appropriate policy responses to ensure that we have product development, then I think the issue of seasonality would be even further reduced. But as minister, I'm pleased to say that the direction that we're going in, I think we've seen and we've made remarkable strides in respect of reducing seasonality in Barbados. And it is a team effort, and we will continue to build on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Michael. Angel?
Thank you, Chair. My question, and I believe the ministry touched on it earlier in terms of the linkages policy, but I wanted to go a little deeper in terms of a local procurement policy. Does the ministry have a local procurement policy with, for example, the hotels, where there will be a minimum percentage of food products or the same arts and crafts you were speaking of to be placed inside of the actual hotels? So, for example, we produce pepper sauce, or we produce jams, some of us produce soaps. Are these items, is there a minimum percentage where these items can be placed in the hotels, especially the new ones that are now being built?
I'll ask the Permanent Secretary to comment as well, but we don't currently have that policy position in place. It would have to start with what I refer to as moral suasion, working with the hoteliers. For example, a number of artists that we have in Barbados who we would want, for example, the hotel sector, whenever they're refurbishing their properties, to purchase art locally versus buying art abroad. And there are several other products, and that's why we started the Linkages Council to create that awareness. And represented on the Linkages Council, you have not only hoteliers, but you have agriculturalists, you have others who sit on that council. And the goal of that council is to ensure that we can even build more linkages, but more importantly, that we can drive even more sales for manufacturing, well, generally for people in Barbados who supply, who would have product and or services to supply the tourism sector. I'll ask the Permanent Secretary, P.S. Blackman, to comment further. Yes?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the question. At this time, we don't have a specific policy. I'm linking what you are asking to be a type of affirmative action for local businesses to sell their products on to the tourism sector. The approach that we are taking is to create more of that awareness and build. My colleague this morning spoke about the marketplace, to allow for the matching of demand and supply where that awareness is built, so that our hoteliers would be aware of what is on the ground and who can supply and the quality. So that is the approach that we are taking, and we are anticipating that through that work, we will be able to create more demand and be able to sell more of our local products to the hoteliers. And not only just in terms of selling, but be able to take some of the iconic images, for instance, that we have in Barbados, and have them linked to some of the merchandising that can be sold that represents Barbados, so that, again, it helps us to retain more revenue. So that is the thinking of the ministry, and that is what the council will be looking at as we try to advance that policy. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And a follow-up to that, you know, I'm always an advocate for the small man. Will the ministry, or rather the council, be assisting those small businesses, these small entrepreneurs out there, to help them meet the packaging and certification and other standards that they may have that are required by the hotels and large tourism entities?
That work will be executed through the Commerce Minister, Senior Minister Simmons spoke pointed to himself, he has a number of agencies, including the Barbados National Standards, that could help in building out the standards for the sector ones. There's a level of, they have been set, let me say. So we intend to work closely with his ministry. There's also a small business unit under his ministry as well that helps to set the policy framework for small businesses. And I believe once people understand what are the quality requirements in order to supply a particular good or service, then his section will be able to help with the labeling and so on, so that they can meet the requirements in order to improve their supply to the. Let me say that our interaction, certainly with the hoteliers and so on, there is not an aversion to having small businesses sell on their products to the hoteliers, but quality obviously must be paramount, and I believe there is a significant role. We do know that BNSI, Barbados National Standards Quality, does have a program in place to support entrepreneurs or small business people be able to develop the relevant labeling and to meet the quality standards so that their products can not only be sold locally, but also can be sold internationally and regionally. So that's again, the mode, the approach that we will take in the ministry to be able to assist the small businesses, because it's not exactly our mandate, but working closely with the Ministry of Small Business, the Ministry of Commerce, the Barbados National Standards, and so on, to be able to work along to push that remit.
Thank you, Ayuba.
Thank you, Honourable Member for Christchurch South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Minister, I know that today there's been a lot of discussion around how we ensure that stakeholders feel very involved in tourism. Stakeholders, ordinary Barbadians. And I have a question that's probably perhaps a little bit heavy and a little bit involved, but I need to ask it nevertheless. So one area in my constituency is the Dover area, where there are a number of tourism plans. But the placement of those tourism plans within a community means that very often the residents feel displaced, whether it is due to traffic congestion, whether it is due to the activities of the hotels in the area themselves. But the placement of hotel plants in and around communities means that there has to be mechanisms that ensure that we have kind of a symbiotic kind of relationship, so that Barbadians don't feel that they then become second-class people within their own neighborhoods. And very often as well, what the residents would complain about is that when they have concerns or issues, they don't know where to go or who to call, where that strategy lies in terms of how we do that development. So that while the ministry can boast of the number of tourism plants, the number of hotels, the question is who then monitors where there is issues of, I'll use the word dislocation, or challenges. Where does that overall strategy lie for how we kind of make sure the development of tourism plans does not then create friction amongst locals and tourist development?
Honourable Member, first of all, the placement of hotels within communities is something that has long been, I think, a feature of the Barbadian landscape. Certainly the planning department and with new planning department regulations and so on, I think even greater attention now will be paid to where hotel plants are placed in the communities and what certainly is required of hotel plants when they go into communities. In the area, of course, in the Dover area, where there has been for a long time tourism, not only hotels, but other tourism products within that area. But I've seen not only benefits for the community and benefits for the country, but what I'm hearing you to say is that oftentimes there are issues that will certainly would revolve around whatever is happening in the community. We don't have, we have a product department that focuses predominantly on the product within product in Barbados, ensuring that the standard of accommodation is maintained to a specific standard. We don't have a mechanism for feedback which would allow members within the community. I believe that I was trying to remember the name of the unit. I believe the Citizens Engagement Unit that would be responsible and take calls and field questions from members of the public and respond to them. I think it's led by the Director of Citizenship Engagement. And that obviously is an opportunity whereby persons have any concerns with respect to the plan. Of course, if there's going to be new plan in the area based on the town and planning department regulations, a billboard must be posted. It must set out what is to be had on a particular site, and then comments are entertained. And I often know that, oftentimes that you have to obviously engage a number of studies to ensure that the plan is fit for, or whatever tourism product is fit for a particular area. So whilst we don't have it within the ministry directly, I think there's an opportunity for us maybe that we can think about it and see how best we can work with communities on a PR basis, or have discussions with the Citizenship Engagement Unit to further and the launch of appropriate PR to facilitate responses from the community.
Thank you for that, Minister. You know, I'm appreciative of how you ended, because at the beginning I was feeling a little bit like how my residents would feel. Everybody tells them it belongs to, the issue belongs to somebody else. So the issue belongs to planning, the issue belongs to citizen engagement. But at the same time, as you said, the country gains a lot of benefit from it. Tourism talks about, again, how many new hotels we have, you know, and all of that, and we encourage citizens to play our part. But when the citizens have concerns, then there doesn't seem to be any central authority that takes that up. And I hear you saying, okay, we'll try to do some PR and think about it, but I'm encouraging you to think about it very critically, because if we don't, and as we see the growth, as you have said, of tourism and the interface with communities, we want to be able to maintain a level of harmony. And somebody has to be able to be keeping an eye on that. Somebody has to be responsible for how we maintain that harmony, so that Barbadians themselves, again, feel that they are not only the ones to smile and serve, but that they are not dislocated within their communities, yeah? And so my next question then has to also do then with the interface and your work then with the other tourism players as well in this respect. I remember, again, from the residents of Dover, having a challenge and trying to find out, again, from the ministry, where they could go, and then being pointed to, I believe, which was the Tourism Association, or the Hotel Association? BHTA, and then it wasn't the BHTA, it had to go somewhere else. And so I'm asking then, what is the nature of the working relationship that the ministry then has with the other kind of players within tourism, again, to make sure, again, that we have that level of harmony that is needed?
Honourable Member, I will tell you that we work effectively with our stakeholders. There's a lot of engagement. Barbados certainly could not have been growing tourism at the rate it's been growing unless we have the good cooperation of the BHTA and other stakeholders. And that will continue, certainly under my watch, continue to be a focus. Of course, like most people, I believe in the orderly development of Barbados as a country, and therefore any opportunities for us to advance the work of the Ministry of Tourism along with stakeholders, I think will, of course, redound to the benefit of Barbados. Working relationships, it depends on the level. I'm aware that, for example, if there not necessarily, I wouldn't refer to them as a neighborhood watch or neighborhood watches, but what I would refer to them if they're communities and there are any issues relating to either developments regarding a tourism product or existing tourism product, that if the Ministry of Tourism is contacted, that we wouldn't have any difficulty bringing the players together to sit down and to discuss. Once it remains within the portfolio, I also have to be mindful as a government minister not to cross portfolios and not to cross ministerial boundaries. And it's something that whenever I go to work and we have to discuss or make decisions, that is the first thing that follows my mind. One, our development of the country, and secondly, avoiding the crossing of ministerial lines. But I also say that in working with the BHDA, we do work with them very closely. They are very responsive. I've found them to be very, very responsive. And if there are issues and concerns, then we are very happy to work with you and to resolve them. Because it seems as though that what you're asking for is a conduit to work with communities relating to matters of tourism within communities. The Private Secretary wants to add a few words.
Recently, Minister did make a reference to the Citizens Engagement Unit that has been established. And I believe that was done to be able to provide that conduit for all ministries to be able to respond to citizens who may have a challenge, be it tourism or any other matter. Recently, there was the launch of the Pearly app that would allow, again, citizens who may have challenges, whether it is water or whether it is a problem with respect to tourism, to be able to post the particular concern there, and it is then dispersed to the particular ministry or stakeholder who has the best opportunity to provide a response or an answer to address the concern that is raised. So the ministry does have an officer identified to be able to respond. There are times when matters may reach the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. that would require a particular response, and we work with our stakeholders, whether it is IHB or whether it is the BHTA, to be able to resolve those matters. But we certainly hear you from the larger community, citizen-wide basis, and certainly we would utilize that framework, that infrastructure that has been set up, the Pearly app, and certainly the Citizens Engagement Unit to be able to address matters at a wider basis. But if there are things that you recognize at this point that we need to have a one-on-one, we can certainly raise that with the ministry, and we will seek then to see how best we can resolve the situation.
Thank you so very much. And I know that the residents of Dover, who inundate my phone daily with calls and concerns, would be happy to hear that. I think finally, just my final question, through you, Chair, but this has to do, I guess, from the tourist aspect and the tourist experience. So outside of the exit surveys, how does the ministry monitor the tourist experience on a day-to-day and their interaction, again, within communities. And again, I go from that area in Dover, right? So I hear the citizens' concerns, but I also know the tourists' concerns as well. So whether it is with crime, whether it is with unlighted areas, whether it is with the times of entertainment within the area or lack thereof, I also get those queries and concerns that come. And again, the question is always then, who is the channel or who is the conduit? So of course we say, go back to your hotel and tell your hotel. And again, because of the ministry that I was in, we had before with culture, during Carifesta, we would have brought large delegations here. And then the question was, all of the concerns then came to us. And then it was always, so they go to the hotel, but it's the ministry then aware, or BTMI, whoever is responsible, I don't know. And I just wanted to just understand a little bit of how, who does that, who monitors that, again, so that then we can be responsive to how we refine what we offer.
Thank you, Honourable Member. What I will do is ask Marsha Aline, the BTMI's Chief Product Officer, to come to the microphone. She's been working not only with communities, she's also been working with the Barbados Police Service regarding a number of issues. Whenever we have challenges with customers, with visitors in Barbados, Aline is the person who leads her team with the responses. So if Marsha Aline is in her place, I'll ask Ms. Aline to take the microphone.
Development Officer for the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. Is it possible, I can ask Minister to repeat the question, please? Sorry, the question was on managing the customer experience.
Yes, if you, and obviously the role of your division in terms of dealing not only with customer issues, but also dealing with issues within the community.
Certainly. So the customer experience team are the first point of entries, both for the seaport and the airport, when persons come into the island. And they ferret a number of queries as it relates to accommodation, attractions, places to stay, they run the gamut in terms of what kind of responses guests actually need. From a guest experiences perspective, we deal with a number of critical incidences that happen with our guests that come to stay on island, whether it be a drowning, an unfortunate instance such as, a death in the family. Sometimes there are robberies, there are different things that happen with our guests from time to time, and our team intercede, whether it would be connecting them with a counselor if that is needed, or interceding in terms of medical attention, working with the hospitals, working with the clinics, working with different agencies to help give them the kind of support and assistance that they need from time to time. And these, of course, these incidents happen very late in the mornings, early in the mornings, on weekends, on bank holidays, but our team, definitely does support our visitors who find themselves in some unfortunate situations and circumstances. Okay. From a destination management perspective, we also work with a number of the agencies across the island, whether it would be the Ministry of Health, NCC, MTW, a number of the ministries, to ensure that the product, whether it is the beaches, the roads, we report on issues as it relates to things from a road perspective, from a beach perspective, from a medical perspective, to ensure that the overall product gets the level of attention that's needed to ensure not only that our guests actually enjoys the island, but our locals as well. So we work very, very closely with the lifeguards at the NCC. We work closely with the Ministry of Beautification and Environment as well, and of course the Ministry of Health, as it relates to any kind of issues that may be, relevant across the island.
Thank you very much, Ms. Aline. And if I may just comment further here with your permission, Mr. Chairman. I believe, obviously, there are some issues within the area of Christchurch South, Honourable Member, and I believe what would be an appropriate response would be to sit with you and have the relevant ministry officials present to go through some of the issues, because I suspect that these issues are concentrated within a particular area, and if they are concentrated in a particular area where I, as a minister responsible for tourism, international transport, can intervene along with the stakeholders, including the BHD, to see if we can bring, certainly get some resolution to some of the challenges that may be confronting your area. I sense that is what I'm hearing, so I'm going to put that as an offer from our side, so we can have some interactions with those concerned.
Thank you very much for that, Minister, and I will convey that again to the residents of Dover, and I am sure that I will tell you that they will be taking you up on that offer very fully and in short order. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I rest.
And if I may also add to, I know there's you didn't put it on the table, but I know there's the issue with speed at which sometimes traffic will go through the St. Lawrence Gap area, and I've reached out to the minister responsible to ask him if he can have some speed humps in the St. Lawrence Gap area, and the reason for this is not only because the locals as well, because the people who drive through, locals, a lot of locals who drive through there, but we also have tourists who traverse the area, and we will work with the Ministry of Transport or Works to see how best we can improve, obviously, and ensure that we have speed humps located within the St. Lawrence Gap to slow down the traffic going through that area as well, for the safety of all.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I second that completely. And I'm glad that the Ministry of Tourism then will take up that mediating role on the behalf of the residents for Dover and St. Lawrence. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. There is a sub-program, and this has to do with transfers to other organizations. There's a transfer to the Barbados National Trust. I have a little bit of a passion for heritage and would like the ministry to elaborate with respect. Well, I know you don't have direct responsibility for the organization, what it is that you're supporting, what it is that they're delivering, what is the expectation with respect to the work of the Barbados National Trust and how it impacts the development of our tourism in the country.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The transfer supports the administrative operations, the Barbados National Trust, and we, over time, have been supporting the initiatives in the National Trust. It is important that we do so because as we continue to focus on heritage tourism, they have a significant and leading role to play in this respect. I will also ask Ms. Jacqueline Pollard, who's the Chief Tourism Development Officer, to comment on this particular matter. Ms. Pollard? Okay, come in. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Pollard, Acting Chief Tourism Development Officer. With reference to your question, Minister, the National Trust has been for many, many years, even before it came to tourism, have been getting this annual subvention to assist, as you rightly said, with the administrative costs of running the organization. Because as we all are well aware, is that it is a non-governmental organization. It does not generate enough funds from the fundraising activities, be it through the open house during the annual winter tourist season, where we invite both locals and visitors to tour the many great houses and also gardens around the country to add to a different type of experience that they could see part of our history. We can expose them to the horticultural aspect of the tourism industry, and these funds are not enough to run the workings of the National Trust. So the government of Barbados gives the annual subvention to assist with the day-to-day operations of the organization. That's basically it.
Thank you very much. The last comment to me is a little bit revealing. I'm not opposed to the subvention, so let me put out there, I'm a life member of the trust. My question had to do with what is expected of the trust with respect to developing our tourism product in the area of heritage. Now, I heard mention not in terms of expectation, but in terms of limited revenue, the matter of open houses and open gardens. Now, I understand that because I'm familiar with the work, but my question has to do with the mandate that the trust gives itself speaks to preservation of heritage. My question is about the connection between the mandate of the ministry and the aims and objectives of the trust. What is it that the ministry expects the trust to be doing that will help the ministry in furthering the ministry's own objectives?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I'll ask Ms. Pollard to respond, and thereafter I'll ask the Permanent Secretary to comment.
Yes, Minister, it would be from the perspective of preservation, conservation of some of those great houses, preserving the culture of the island, and we have been like houses like the George Washington House to assist them because that is part of our product, and that would be able to generate income from the user fees. We have the Arlington House, where that would also, the funds that we give to them would also help to conserve and preserve and do what it takes to have those historical houses, buildings in a pristine as possibly can that would remain sustainable for years to come. And that is a very big component of our tourism product. And we have to preserve that as part of our culture. So the work that the ministry expects the National Trust is that to continue with the preservation, conservation, to make it sustainable, not just for tomorrow, but for many, many years to come, because we want our product to be very much sustainable.
Right. Thank you, Minister. The ministry, part of our work requires us, or part of tourism, I should say, is the selling of our culture, our heritage, or sharing it with the rest of the world. So from that perspective, the National Trust, their work is very much aligned with what we're trying to do in the ministry to share our culture, to share our heritage with the rest of the world through tourism. So when we look at our attractions, Ms. Pollard spoke about George Washington House, for instance. That is part of the legacy of Barbados, and we share that often with the rest of the world, explaining that certainly their first president, it bears his name, and he was the first president to certainly have visited Barbados at that time. So that becomes part of the heritage and culture that we share. And there are times that even as we move forward to the 400 years anniversary of when you had the first landing, we look at how can we maybe recreate the experience, look at the period clothing at that time, and share that as part of our experience, part of our tourist attraction. During the month or that time that we are starting, we will be celebrating that part of our history. So we anticipate that we will certainly get some assistance from the National Trust in that regard, in sharing the history and in sharing more of the architecture, the stories around these great houses with our guests when they visit the island, and support the policy of the ministry to use heritage as part of the element or plank in advancing our tourism business. So that's how we work with the National Trust to pursue our tourism strategy.
Thank you very much, PS. Chair, through you, a follow-up to this. You spoke about the fact that we do need these elements as part of our branding, these heritage elements. The ministry gives a subvention to the Barbados National Trust. This follow-up question has maybe two components to it. One is, do you have periodic, at least, inspections of those properties that you mentioned? You focus on George Washington House. Ms. Pollard was kind enough to speak to Arlington House, which is much closer to me, and to make sure of the quality. You know, you use the term pristine condition. So are you monitoring? And I've already indicated where my interest lies. And so the corollary to that would be, is the subvention enough to make sure that the ministry is able to obtain what the ministry intends to obtain?
I know if you ask organizations if the funding that was allocated to them is enough, I'm sure they would say no, they would like some more. I'm saying oftentimes when you ask organizations if whatever transfers are made to them, they will come back and tell you no, it's not enough, they would like some more. But obviously we do it within the constraints of our budget. But I'll ask the Permanent Secretary to speak again to this matter. P.S.
The organization, I believe the subvention was increased. Where it is now, it is probably still not sufficient, but we are trying to grow it certainly within the context of whatever constraints that we may still be facing. But the ministry, we will find other creative ways. And in fact, let me speak to the inspections. Those properties that certainly benefit from the concessions under the Tourism Development Act, Ms. Pollard would share with you, usually they would go out and visit these properties and make sure that certainly the benefit or the concessions for which they have been granted are being utilized in the manner in which they have sought to have them. So from that context, those that benefit under the TDA we would receive visits. But the limitations of our human resources, certainly in the ministry, would not allow us to visit every one of these great houses, but the engagement certainly takes place at the level of the National Trust, and if there is a problem, it would then filter up through the National Trust to the ministry, and then we can then address the problem as it comes up.
Thank you very much. Just to say that I was not asking it with an expectation that you'd be visiting every great house, but you mentioned some specific, I think, high visibility, high traffic attractions. You mentioned George Washington House, for example. I would expect that you would visit George Washington House, not necessarily Allendale Great House or Portland Great House, but those significant ones that you mentioned. So my final follow-up question, still relating to the matter of heritage, and again, being familiar both with tourism and the work of the National Trust. We have some challenges from time to time related to what appears to be a disrespect for our built heritage. So I'm talking about buildings, and I am the Member of Parliament for St. Peter. Buildings in Spikestown in particular, some falling apart. And I understand that they are privately owned. The question I have is, what collaboration, if any, does the ministry have with organizations like the Barbados National Trust, and maybe with the ministry responsible for planning, to safeguard the built heritage? You know, the transfer is 620,000. I understand quite well the matter of resource scarcity from time to time, but there are certain things that are necessary if the brand reputation and the integrity of the brand is to be maintained. And my question is, what do you do as a ministry to work with organizations like the Trust and ministries or departments like planning to make sure that we have a robust enough system, maybe legislative framework, to maintain the integrity of our built heritage?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. And before I ask the PS to respond, I also want to share with you that heritage tourism is, if not the leading factor, when persons sit down to make a decision on a vacation destination, it certainly contributes. And therefore, heritage tourism is critically important for the ongoing development of Barbados' tourism. And as a result, we not only, as you quite rightly mentioned, continue to support such organizations that will help us to build out our heritage, but also to become the standard bearer for standards in respect of our heritage. And therefore, with that being said, I just want to let you know that it continues to be a high priority with respect to the ministry's work. I'll ask the Permanent Secretary to quickly respond to your comments as well. Yes?
Thank you, Minister. Usually when there is planning permission granted for development, it would usually require the ministry's input. And we will share our perspective with our counterparts in the planning ministry, and certainly those views that may be advanced by the developers. We are acutely aware that we want to maintain the heritage because that is part of the fabric of Barbados. It is part of what we sell that makes us Barbadians. So we have a vested interest, we being the ministry, have a vested interest in maintaining these cultural and heritage icons around the island. And in that regard, we work with the National Trust to make sure that we can preserve these heritage and cultural icons to make sure that they continue to represent Barbados and represent what the island has to offer. But so our input usually takes place in that regard. There may be town hall meetings that we also would facilitate. For instance, under the tourist accommodation bill that is presently under discussion, in there we had placed a role for the National Trust because we believe that they have the expertise to help us identify or utilize the resources within that organization to maintain any, give the, what you call those, these icon, to ascribe a classification on specific buildings that would want to be sold or be advertised or marketed as a heritage property. So we will utilize the National Trust in that regard so that those particular classifications can be part of their marketing for those specific buildings that may even go on to be part of the accommodation fabric, using the building to provide accommodation services to the sector, and therefore be able to market that classification to persons who are pretty much interested in heritage and culture. But I'll also ask the Minister to have the Director of Research and Planning, Ms. Nicole Allen, to also weigh in on this.
Ms. Nicole Allen.
Good afternoon again. I would like to say that I give a resounding yes to Minister Jordan that the ministry does indeed collaborate with the National Trust and other stakeholders in the protection of our built heritage. I would even go as far back as when Barbados first received its UNESCO World Heritage inscription for historic Bridgetown and its garrison. The Ministry of Tourism and International Transport then, and remains to this day, or even in the form of the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc., serves as a member of the Barbados World Heritage Committee. And so we ensure that the necessary input and support is given to the preservation of our built heritage, understanding that culture is a key pull factor in attracting visitors to our destination. It is indeed an area that allows us to differentiate ourselves. You heard my minister speak about remaining competitive. And one of the main ways in which we can do that is by our culture, the authenticity of what is our destination. And so it is of importance for us to collaborate with these entities. We also, Minister Jordan, sit on the Council of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society. We're an active member there in providing support to the work of that entity, in ensuring that not even just the built heritage, but heritage in its widest remit is given the support from the tourism industry. We also sit on the Council of the Barbados National Trust as well. So however you look at it, however you dice it, there is the input of either the ministry itself directly or one of its entities in giving support to ensure that the built heritage is preserved as an important plank upon which we build our tourism product. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a closing comment to say that, and I just want to say this publicly, it is not necessarily directed to the ministry, but that one of the things that we have to be careful of, Mr. Chair, is the tension that exists between maintaining I use the word integrity, the officer Nicole used authenticity. With respect to culture, that tension between that component and new tourism product, because we are seeing that tension in Spitestone. It is a very visible tension. So we see sometimes the degrading of heritage assets, but not just to create a car park, to create a new tourism product. And I'm saying publicly that the ministry responsible for tourism has to be careful in its implementation, its advice giving, and all that kind of stuff, to, I think, prioritize the authentic product and not the new, could be anywhere product. So I just wanted to conclude with that. I'm not sure. I have another question which is unrelated, so in the next round, I said that before, but I don't know if you understood. I just want to say it again. I have another question that is unrelated.
Thank you, Honourable. Honourable Member for St. Michael. Sorry, St. Philip West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question relates specifically to Airbnb. As we are seeing in terms of trends beyond the standard hotels, there is a demand for Airbnb accommodation, and as people convert their residential units into tourism accommodation, we are seeing that there is an impact on long-term rentals and the cost of properties, whether it is for you to rent, and certainly for locals in experiencing increased housing costs. My question is this in fact something that is more than anecdotal, but that is supported by some of the research of the ministry? And if so, what are we doing proactively so that this does not become a crisis in Barbados, whether done through tourism or in collaboration with housing?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. We currently have in Barbados, certainly within the hotels and villas and others, approximately just over 6,000 rooms available. When you add the vacation rental, vacation rentals to that number, you have close to about you have just under 13,000, but another 7,000 vacation rentals. What we're doing with respect to, and we know this because of research that we've undertaken, there's some vacation rental entities that would register with the ministry through its product quality division. And we need to ensure that one, we have an accurate count of the vacation rental accommodation in Barbados. Certainly the vacation rental accommodation pool does help Barbados. There are often times where there are people who want to visit Barbados and to have accommodation, and they can't get into the traditional hotel accommodation. And therefore, what happens is that they would obviously book the vacation rentals. There are also villas that have come into the vacation rental pool because they've utilized the concessions. And a part of the requirements for the concessions is that you have to open up the property and you have to let the property, so the property has to be rented. So when you add the vacation villas and others qualified under the Tourism Development Act, and then you add the others who are now coming into the space to offer their products for rental, this potentially helps the destination. But to your specific point regarding demand for Airbnb relative housing accommodation, I believe that a study would have to be undertaken to measure the impact that this is having on Barbados' housing stock. I can't sit here and answer the question without that information, and perhaps it's something that we would have to, in conjunction with the appropriate ministry, undertake a study to see whether or not there's been any fallout or whether there's cause for concern or whether we need to have a policy to address the matter at hand. So I give you my word that we will work with I would assume it would be the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance to understand and get a firm feel for what is happening. But having said that, the vacation rental pool does help Barbados in terms of accommodation, and especially when we have not only during the peak periods, winter, but also when we have selected events going on in Barbados that people will wish to come to Barbados and support. It is also, having said that, it is also important, and that's why when we piloted the tourist accommodation bill, that we made it clear that this is more about regulation. This is not about controlling the number of rooms or putting people out of business. That is not what we're about. It was more about having an understanding of where we are. I'll pause and ask Ms. Lana Harewood if she has anything further to add in respect of this matter. Ms.
Good afternoon, Lana Harewood, Manager, Product Quality, Barbados Tourism Product Authority. Minister, I agree with you. The vacation rentals based on what we have registered for our levies has increased throughout the years. And it is, I can't speak from the perspective of how it is impacting the long-term rentals, but what I can say is definitely impacting our registered accommodation stock because they outweigh our short-term stock. Currently, our numbers reflect for the vacation rentals, 1,323 properties that's registered with us, which has a bedroom count of over 3,000. So there is an impact on our short-term rentals. But as the minister would have indicated, a study would have to be done to look at it in terms of how it is affecting the long-term rental pool. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, a follow-up question. Even as we have not yet done formal studies, I think that we can see from anecdotal evidence that ordinary people, our neighbors, people in not too far from us, are actually entering the accommodation business. Barbados has a brand and we have a reputation. And my question is, what proactive effort is being put into ensuring that the standards that we expect from all are maintained and that Barbados's brand remains at the excellent level it is, even as ordinary people, not accustomed to providing accommodation, enter the market?
Thank you, Honourable Member. The initiative to pilot the tourist accommodation bill was in fact intended to be a proactive measure to answer the very question that you posed. And I do agree with you, and I do so sincerely, that Barbados has a very strong brand, and that brand has to be protected. And therefore, we went the route of proposing the tourist accommodation bill to ensure, for that very reason, that we continue to protect the Barbados brand. Of course, the bill would have died with the last Parliament, and therefore we are proposing to make some additional changes to the bill. Once we do so, we will again, as we indicated on the last occasion, we'll have a select committee of Parliament undertake a review and obviously allow persons to comment so we can get their comments. But we must never ever allow the Barbados brand to be impacted in a very negative way, because if we do so, it will be very difficult for us. I'm not going to share with you on this occasion a catalog of the challenges that the product quality department well, and let me pause there and say that we have a number of reviews that come to the attention of the product quality department, and those reviews oftentimes tell the story. But I do agree with you, Honourable Member, that is something that we have to work with our stakeholders to ensure that we protect the Barbados brand.
Well, Minister, I want to thank you for the work that you and your team are doing, and I join my colleagues in complimenting you on some of the achievements to date. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Michael Central.
Thank you, Chair. This question is once again in the spirit of champion the small man. After reading the brief, I realized that although there has been a steady increase in the hotels, the larger hotels, there has been a decrease in the guest houses and the apartments. And I'm seeing there was a drastic decrease, especially in the year of 2023. So I was wondering what could have caused that. And I am aware in 2023 there were certain things that were put in place, for example, the levies, the additional taxes, and of course there's always an increase in terms of operating expenses. There's also obviously then competition with the larger hotels, and there was a strengthening of the compliance and regulatory and compliance requirements. So my question really is it the minister's opinion that the ministry's policy sufficiently protects small Barbadian accommodation providers?
In the absence of legislation, it will be difficult for me to give you the appropriate response. The reason why we're advancing the tourist accommodation bill is to ensure that we have obviously regulatory oversight, but that we also set a standard, a very basic standard for tourist accommodation facilities in Barbados. Once we do that, we'll be in a position. Currently, even though we have individuals who have vacation rental properties, they're registered with the Barbados Tourism Product Authority, but then there are others who don't register. And in the absence of that, I think it will be difficult for me to come to a conclusion with respect to why we don't see or why there's a dip and or increase in the number of accommodations, depending on their standing with respect to whether they're apartment hotels, whether they're guest houses, whether they're individual vacation rentals. So I would prefer, in the absence of information, to suggest that we get that information and then have a more informed view of that.
Thank you. I yield back.
Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Minister, both you and your Director of Research just prompted my memory on a matter, and I thought I would quiz you on it. In the context of enhancing competitiveness, your Director of Research would have reminded the House about Barbados's being so privileged as to host a UNESCO World Heritage Site. if memory serves me correctly, we would have gotten that award for Bridgetown and the Greater Bridgetown area and the garrison around 2011. And I believe that we would have first started this journey by way of starting the inscription process in 2002 or 3. So roughly speaking, we have been on this road now for about 24 years. And it is a matter of obvious cultural significance. So my question is, are there any plans for the development of the World Heritage Site? And if so, would you be able to take us on a little bit of a journey so that we understand what is being formulated?
Thank you, Minister. I'll ask the Director of Research and Planning to respond to Minister. Ms. Nokolani.
Thank you, Minister, for the question. The real work of the development to developing the Barbados World Heritage Site really rests under the ministry responsible for culture. As I mentioned, we sat as a member of the committee and gave input into the tourism potential. Having said that, nonetheless, with the current work we're doing to look at attractions, the minister referenced this earlier, the implementation of our attractions competitiveness study, where we looked at over 240 attractions, and we also received input from over 7,500 of our visitors into how those things could be improved. The Bridgetown area was one of such areas assessed, and we are actively working with the communities principally in the Rihanna Drive area. We're looking at how we can curate a tour, because one of the things we've heard coming out of that study is that what is there that is new for visitors to do. We have also heard how can new experiences be created, and efforts are being made to bundle, as it is called, tours or experiences in close vicinity to have them as a single experience. And so in reference to the Bridgetown area, we've been looking at how could we combine possibly Rihanna Drive, for example? How could we combine that with Kensington, which we know to be the mecca of cricket? How can we combine that also with the Cricket Legends Museum, which is just across the street? And then further up into Bridgetown, how can we also pair that with the Pelican Village so that we have an experience that looks at artisans? And then to bring into the mix as well, empowering the communities in those areas so that the persons who reside in those areas who are best suited to tell their story will be the ones who would conduct tours of that particular experience, and where they may be lacking in those skills, the necessary training. We heard that comment being raised earlier in the chambers today. And so where that training will be lacking, to give support to those persons to be able to facilitate that. And I believe it was Minister Monroe who asked questions about the smaller businesses and how, no, sorry, it was Tyra Trotman, Member of Parliament Trotman, who asked about the small man and giving opportunities for the small man. So looking at where are those businesses that we can support and integrate them into that overall experience. So that is one of the plans that is afoot, actively being examined, and also looking at how we can include it as an offering from tour operators. There are a number of tour operators, we've already identified a number of them, who take their clients through Rihanna Drive, and it is our hope that what we will package would be a more attractive offering to them than the current, drive-through type of experience that exists. So, Minister Simmons, that is one such plan that is currently in process. Thank you.
I am obliged to you. I honestly think that it is a very useful approach that you have outlined to the House. The authenticity of a Rihanna Drive experience, which is, as you put it, bundled with neighboring tourism attractions, makes good sense. And similarly, I would want to urge that you think in the context of the other side of Bridgetown, more in the constituency of the honourable member who sits to my right, where we have the in St. Michael South, we would have that labyrinth of tunnels which run underneath the garrison and begin, I believe, just outside of Washington House, or can be accessed from outside of Washington House. And I don't know if the honourable member is familiar with below ground in his constituency, as he is above ground, but clearly that too could be linked with the Barbados Defence Force Armory Tour and so on. And I do feel that in the context of authenticity, that is, and unique attractiveness, that perhaps is one of the, or they perhaps are some of the areas which we would have as strong selling points. My second question, Mr. Chairman, turns really on the work that is being done, and I think we've alluded to it several times today when we talk about new destinations and seeking out new destinations, and again, in the context of maintaining our competitive edge. And obviously, we have to do this. It don't happen just by accident. You have to have the airlift capacity for the people to come here, which in turn means we have to be doing substantial work beforehand on air services agreements. For example, if we're talking about the African continent, we have to be able to identify those places and have the arrangements in place by way of agreement for them to come. And I would like to hear from you, Minister, what work is being done on air services agreements, and not only what work, but with whom, if any have started to bear fruit, then please elaborate on that.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Certainly in our attempt to not only open up new markets, but in our attempts to drive new business, and particularly non-stop services to Barbados. As you well know, because you serve as a Minister of Tourism and International Transport, we have to not only review and update, but where we don't have air services agreements in place, we have to do so. I can think of no better person than the Acting Permanent Secretary, who's sitting to my left, who can speak with conviction to these matters. Acting Permanent Secretary, Dion Gibbs-Nichols.
Good afternoon, Dion Gibbs-Nichols, Permanent Secretary Acting within the Ministry of International Transport. The Ministry continues to forge ahead with the negotiation and finalization of various air services agreements. These agreements govern air services between states, and they are bilateral in nature. They also facilitate direct travel, tourism, trade, and investment between states, and they assist with the build-out of airlift capacity, as they create a legal certainty for airlines to plan their routes. Barbados is seeking to enter into new arrangements with various countries that are considered non-traditional markets or emerging markets, such as the states in Latin America, Africa, and parts of Asia and the Pacific. Recently, we would have finalized agreements with Qatar and Panama in 2024, Brazil and France in 2025. And as Minister mentioned, Barbados has a reputation as a safe, politically stable state. And this is attractive to airlines and travelers, and we build on this positive factor. We are currently in discussions with approximately 10 different states. To name a few, Peru, Morocco, Argentina, Brazil, Bahrain, Austria, and China. And for the financial year 2026 to 2027, we are seeking to commence discussions with Ethiopia, Egypt, and South Africa. And let me mention here that we work in tandem with the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. in terms of strategy and the countries that we seek to have agreements with. Thank you.
Very much. I'm not sure if the Permanent Secretary to Tourism would like to add any remarks to that, but suffice to say the direction that we're going in. We attended Roots World last year, and we also had an opportunity the year before that to meet with several interested parties. And the rationale for us upgrading our air services agreement is in direct response to the interest being shown by some of those countries. So we will continue, Honourable Member, to pursue the policy of not only updating, but where there's no air services agreement in place, that we do so, as we're doing with, for example, Fifth Freedom Rights and Seventh Freedom Rights. And I'm hopeful that at some appropriate time, I will have more news to share with you and the country with respect to the direction that we're going in. But certainly, we are going to continue at full pace with respect to updating and or initiating new air services agreements with key partners to drive that air route connection and connectivity with the strategy that we have in place as we embark on the second phase of our airlift strategy. I think, Mr. Chairman, just for the record, the acting permanent secretary, because I know that they had a different name on the screen, the acting permanent secretary, International Tourism Division, is Ms. Dion Gibson-Nichols.
Honourable Member of St. John.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, one of the main planks for my ministry this year is sports tourism. And I'm hoping, in a similar vein to a previous minister, where I would have asked to have a point person from within your ministry to work with my ministry in relation to some of the projects that you have coming on stream. And the reason why I'm saying this is because, and let me apologize up front, I was really disappointed that, and I'm not sure if it is your ministry, that Run Barbados, for I think 2 years, was happening on the East Coast Road. I thought it was a major mistake to move it from an area where the athletes would have people at the side of the road cheering them on, to the East Coast Road where it was just trees on one side and the sea on the other side. Another example of this would have been at the Roger Boys Classic, where I had an 11 o'clock press conference, and an officer from your ministry came and said why I didn't say that I was having a press conference, because they were having one at 11:30. So I'm just asking if it is possible to have a point person from within your ministry identified, so that if there are projects coming from your side, that we can have a collab. Last year, calendar year, they had some new initiatives that were coming that were big. The drag racing and then the Grand Prix was also happening, and I believe both of them are coming again. So I'm just asking if it is possible that you can identify a member or your team that is responsible for sports to work in concert with my ministry going forward as it relates to the sports tourism project. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I'll ask the CEO of the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. to respond to you with respect to Run Barbados and to give the reason why there was a shift because of some ongoing infrastructure works here. But relating to the latter point with respect to the point person, I would recommend one, if you, the permanent secretary will communicate to you the point person in the ministry, but more importantly, there's a sports department within the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc., and that's led by a sports manager, and therefore any requests relating to the point person would be communicated to you by the CEO of the BTMI to your ministry. As it relates to the point person in the ministry, the permanent secretary will also delegate, not to in any way duplicate the efforts within the ministry, but we also, because of the BTMI being an agency within the Ministry of Tourism and National Transport, it is recommended that the point person be the sports manager going through the Chief Executive Officer, to be that person who effectively would coordinate and handle relations between your ministry and the ministry that I currently lead. So I will recommend that approach, Minister, if you're in agreement, and I will also ask the CEO of the BTMI to comment with respect to Run Barbados and also with respect to her view as it relates to the sports manager being nominated, who I believe currently works with your ministry. But I'll ask the BTMI CEO to comment. CEO?
Thank you, Minister. You are correct. The sports manager does work with the Ministry of Sport and the National Sports Council, which I would have referred to earlier in terms of the joint committee that works looking at the number of sporting initiatives on the island. So we will really seek to firm up that relationship a little more, have a more structured approach to those meetings, which we can discuss with the technical officers within the ministry. As it relates to Run Barbados, you may realize that December last year, the run was shifted back to Bay Street. I believe the move to the East Coast before that would have been as a result of a number of issues that would have been encountered previously. I know one of the things that was discussed was the fact that in terms of road closures and the runners having to navigate with traffic, not being the ideal situation. But it was also felt from a tourism perspective in terms of exposing or taking the race to the more scenic side of the island, which we do recognize then that once that move happened, yes, as a result, some of the things that you were saying in terms of the lack of crowd participation, no support along the route, etc. And recognizing that last year, also in conjunction with the fact that the roadworks were happening on the East Coast, we made a decision to move the race back to Bridgetown, and it was met with great appreciation from the running community in particular, were the ones that really matter in that regard. So we did listen to the comments, we did listen to the feedback, and we did make the change, and I do not believe that we will then revert back to the East Coast. And I know we had this discussion as well, Minister, so we did listen to all the feedback. Thanks.
Sorry, Chair, you're looking like if I should have a follow-up question. Minister, quick question about rural tourism. Any thoughts in terms of how we can trigger that?
Yes. We have, in fact, a number of our major attractions are located in rural Barbados. And that continues to be a significant feature in respect of Barbados's landscape. The plan that we have with Trove also seeks to develop and to ensure that more tourist attractions are located in rural Barbados. You would have heard from the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry earlier, and you would have heard from the Director of Planning and Research recounting and rehashing the number of proposals that we have before us as a ministry that we intend to execute. And I can tell you that there shall be further interest in the execution of attractions in rural Barbados. And as I indicated earlier, rural Barbados continues to attract a significant number of tourist attractions, including not only sightseeing, but a number of other tours that have come on stream. And we believe that that is the way to go, Honourable Member.
Honourable member for Christchurch South.
Thank you very much, Chair. Minister, again, because of the constituency that I represent on the South Coast, so the interaction with lots of tourists is daily. I see them catching buses. They're on ZR vans. They're going to the same supermarkets and the little shops in the neighborhoods. I see them coming from big hotels and carrying little shopping bags with milk and juice and all of those things. And therefore, I'm wondering, as much as we talk about the increase in terms of arrival, what is the exact state in terms of visitor spend? And if you could provide some very, very specifics over a period of time, if you can provide perhaps from 2023 till now so that we can have an idea of the trajectory of visitor spend on the island.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I must tell you that we have not only the earnings report from the Governor of the Central Bank, but we also have a number of metrics, if I wish to refer to it that way, from credit card companies that give us an indication as to visitor spend in Barbados. What that report does, it captures spend by credit card used on island in Barbados based on foreign banks. And with that information, we have been able to realize the significant spend across categories. For example, if people go into a supermarket and they use a foreign credit card, we get a sum total on a quarterly basis. If they go in, for example, transport services, jewelry, etc., we get that. What I can tell you in terms of tourism earnings, in 2018, Barbados would have earned $2.238 billion. In 2019, $2.598 billion. In 2020, and you would appreciate the fact that we had COVID, so it would have slumped to $1.2 billion. 2021, $1.2 billion. In 2022, it was $1.869 billion. 2023, it was $2.313 billion. And in 2024, and that's the latest available information I have at hand, it was $2.732.6 million. What that tells you is that we would have increased, certainly when you compare 2024 to 2023, by almost $400 million. If this holds based on what we're realizing in Barbados, then I'm sure that the story remains the same. So I can tell you, and it is one figure that I like to measure, and it is not the ministry's figures, it is the figure provided to us by the Central Bank of Barbados in terms of tourism earned. Of course, and this does not capture the entire spend in the country, because if there are persons paying a taxi driven by cash, for example, that is not captured. But suffice to say that based on our 2024 numbers, when compared to 2023, you can see the difference, 2732 or $2.732 billion versus $2.313 billion, which is a substantial increase in earnings. And I always argue, having come from the private sector, I don't play with numbers in terms of arrivals. I like to see the greenbacks and what is counted, what is accounted for in the country. So I'm pleased to say that based on our available data, it appears that tourism earnings continue to go in the right direction. And the fact that you have earned over close to $400 million year on year is a significant indicator, not only on the strength of what we have, but it also tells us and continues to paint the picture that tourism can earn. And even though we've driven airlift and we've increased airlift to the destination, we are also earning more. If you had to go a bit deeper in terms of analysis, and I do my own internal modeling in terms, because I like to know where we're going. Because when you look at the performance of the tourism sector, it also has to flow through, right through to the ordinary man. And a lot of what we are seeing in terms of earnings, because yes, you can do well in hotel earnings. Yes, you can do well in attractions and restaurants and dining, as I refer to it, food and beverage outlets, transportation services where we have information that can be accounted for. But when you look to those who work in the sector, those as a result of, even if we increase occupancy, if we reduce seasonality, there are people who continue to work. They're getting maybe full-time. When I say full-time, I mean 40 hours per week rather than being laid off or reduce hours. If they're in a service charge pool, they're also benefiting from increased service charge. So it paints a story. Look, yes, we will have challenges. The good thing about the ministry is flexible, it's responsive, and we try to put and implement policies that will continue to build out Barbados' tourism success. And the one thing, I go to work every day as a minister, and I always ask myself the question, how can I help to improve Barbados' not only tourism product, but how can we build out tourism to the benefit of the people who ought to benefit from this particular industry. And that is what I go to work daily to set out to do. And that is why you see us concentrating, like I said, not only on airlift in different phases, but also building out the sector, which also means carrying the workers along with us in our tourism mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And I think that response is perhaps a story that needs to be told. Huh? Again, we often, like I said, refer to the airlift, but the fact that we have had such a significant growth in tourism earnings is really laudable for the ministry and the efforts that have been undertaken. But I wanted to just press us a little bit more to just flesh out some of that story, because you said that you do have statistics that will be able to tell us exactly what they're spending on. And I think that's important to be able to understand. So what is it that people are spending on by category, and perhaps the largest or overarching categories, please?
I'm not sure if we have that information with us. Research will have it. I'm not sure if PS would have it. But what I can tell you that a significant amount of spend is made in, of course, you would appreciate this accommodation. Jewelry, for example. In fact, when I look at jewelry, I wasn't aware that so much money is spent on jewelry, for example. Like I said, food and beverage outlets that consume petrol stations included, rental car companies as part of the transport sector. And I can go through a range, but we do have that information. That information is provided by one credit card company, and we get that information on a quarterly basis. And again, that helps us and allows us to zero in on where there's areas for additional growth. And that is why, as a policy decision, when I came to the ministry, I set up a visitor spend task force. And that task force is hard at work, also looking at other avenues to create opportunities for increased earnings. And we're also focusing not only on technology, but also helping persons with marketing to ensure that we can maximize visitor spend on the island. So there are a range of not only strategies that we implemented, but also programs associated with the strategies, and similarly tactics along the way to execute the strategy to ensure that we earn even more from this sector.
And thank you, Minister. I know you said you don't have those statistics, but I just want to stretch again that perhaps this is a story that you really need to tell. And it goes back to the questions that were asked by the Honourable Member, I think for St. Michael's Central, when she kept saying that her interest was about how we involve the small man. And my question was about teasing out where they're spending all this money. So if they're spending in entertainment, if they're spending in food outside of the hotel, because that information then can feed into multiple streams, so whether that is culture, in terms of knowing how to nuance that, whether that is business, again, and small business, for where are the potential growth areas. So not only instructive for you, but then for other ministries and other efforts as well that are critical to the growth of the sector. So I really want to encourage you, perhaps, like I said, to tell this story, not only brought it to the public, but also as well, again, to the other agencies that are going to be necessary to build out as well.
Thank you, Honourable Member, and it's a good suggestion. If I were to look to your constituency alone, in Oistins, I don't think we could have asked perhaps for more, for an area that contributes more significantly to the food and beverage earnings of this country. Obviously, some of it we can track, because if the spend is through credit cards, we can track that. If it's cash spend, it's a little difficult, truth be told, to capture it. But might I add that what is happening at Oistins is not only unique, but I must tell you that whenever we travel to Barbados, not only the tour operators, but those who visited Barbados and repeat visitors, they make the point that they enjoy Oistins, particularly a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday night, and they go back for that very authentic experience. But they also go back because of sustainability issues. The fact that it's a fishing community, the fact that people like to know that, you know, the fishermen bring the fish there, the vendors prepare it, it's then prepared, and then it's an opportunity for a meal along with a good Barbadian beverage. So I think all those areas interwoven can create a more value chain for us to examine and a value chain for us to exploit. But I can think of no better example to share with you than what obtains at
Thank you. Just another follow-up. And I'm glad you went to the area of Oistins, because my question was around what, if there are mechanisms for what I'm going to call philanthropy and give back within our tourism model, right? I used to work for the Caribbean Policy Development Center. And within the Caribbean Policy Development Center, we started an initiative in hotels, where we work with hotels to encourage, I can't remember what was the name of the initiative, to actually give back, again, to specific social causes. Of course, you know, well monitored, justified, etc. But there's so many areas of development. So an area like Oistins, for instance, again, which contributes so much. But again, when we look for expansion and to deal with the fishing community, again, what is the potential? If there is a mechanism by which tourists, and there are a lot of them, I encounter tourists again in my constituency who are looking for social causes, who want to be able to give back, who are accustomed within their own jurisdictions to being able to do that, or engage in philanthropy, and want to understand here in Barbados how they can support the communities sometimes that they are visiting, and then how they can kind of support the wider effort. What is the mechanism, if any?
I'll ask, and we don't currently have a mechanism, but I know the Permanent Secretary, it appears this is dear to her and she would wish to speak to it. So, PS?
Thank you, Minister. I know a few years ago, we would have looked at this through the lens of sustainable tourism. And I remember BTMI had actually their director based in Europe, because the visitor from Europe is particularly interested in conservation and so on. And they had actually put forward a proposal that would allow for the replanting of trees. And the visitor were actually very much interested in paying a small fee, a small sum, to be able to do that type of work when they arrive in Barbados. That proposal is still under discussion. Actually, it had dovetailed quite nicely, certainly with the work being pursued by the Ministry of Energy to reduce the fossil fuel consumption in Barbados. And given that you take a flight, you're flying from one destination to the next, and you are the plane that you arrive on would have been burning fossil fuel as you try to move from one destination to the next. That was being promoted as a way in how you can counter the type of exhaust and the fumes and so on from that particular journey. So we would have to revisit something like that, but it was discussed. It was tabled about 2 years ago, approximately, and there was quite a lot of interest. Apart from that, we have not discussed, I don't know if CEO BTMI, if you've had any discussions in that area, but through the lens of sustainable tourism is where that discussion would have fallen.
I think what you may be referring to, Minister, is something we call volunteerism, where we do get a number. There's no established framework, but we do get a number of requests from various groups coming to the island, many times incentive groups, who want to be able to participate in activities such as this and give back, and we will then reach out to various groups within the communities to arrange such. So whether it's going into schools, we know we have guests who every year travel to Barbados with a suitcase of books to give books back to schools. We have persons who will get involved in painting classrooms. Our cruise lines as well give back to the communities in this way in terms of participating in a number of activities within various communities, rural or otherwise, in terms of give back initiatives as well, which we would sometimes help to facilitate. So it is happening, but it is not in a necessarily through a structured mechanism, but oftentimes it's outreach through BTMI, and then we put persons in touch with various NGOs or community groups where they can then be able to participate and give back to the society.
Thank you very much. Minister, I would like to suggest that perhaps there is need for a structured mechanism to this, because I believe that we might be missing something that can perhaps add to our product tremendously. What you hear from tourists again is that has to be also part of the immersive experience for them. And like I said, there are many tourists, at least that I come into contact with, that who say that they are willing to give back, not just only to volunteer, but they're willing to give money in the specific causes, and they do ask, you know, what is there to be able to do, or that they can get involved, in. I think my final question, and this is a follow-up question through you, Chair, in respect of this, and I go back to, and I notice the Chair is looking at me, I go back to oysters. I go back to the question of oysters that was raised, Minister, and what is the possibility to export the oysters model to other jurisdictions as well?
I don't know if we should export it, or perhaps we should allow that to remain a very unique selling point for your area. But I think the point you're making is, should we not look to other areas to create not necessarily a similar, but perhaps an opportunity for persons to have a food and beverage outlet, particularly on the west coast of Barbados. And therefore, there is such opportunities. Obviously, we will have to deal with the infrastructure. If we model it off a fishing village or a fishing community, then we will look to see where we have the existing fishing communities, and see how best we can partner and create an opportunity to create a dining opportunity, as I refer to it, a dining opportunity at different fish markets, maybe across Barbados. Space is obviously an area. We would have to look at space because that's going to be a consideration with respect to where. What works for Oisin is that you have that vast land space on the beach, and that works well. But it is worth exploring, and we can explore that in conjunction with your ministry as well, and with the ministry responsible for fisheries, to see how best we can explore that opportunity. Back to the question with respect to tourism earnings, I said it was just about 400 million. To provide you exact figures, in 2024, the earnings compared to 2023, the increase was actually $418.7 million that tourism earned. And that is comparing 2024 to 2023. So I just thought I'll share that with you. I give you the numbers, but I didn't do the quick calculation to give you this exact amount. So it's $418.7 million that we would earn.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Michael Southeast.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable Minister and team, I think I will echo the sentiments of my colleagues as well in relation to the outstanding work that you have done in keeping the tourists coming to our island and making Barbados one of the premier destinations. I believe when I look at these estimates, though, I am hearing the Minister in his last comments regarding the $480 million earned. I think sometimes we spend a lot of time on the numbers, which it has its place. But unless there is the trickle-through effect to everybody in the economy, sometimes the numbers do not mean as much to the ordinary man as we might want to place that emphasis on. Now, when I look at the types of things that we are spending in these estimates, we're putting monies towards the National Trust, we're putting monies towards the small hotels, all justifiably being done. I think the questions that have come out in the course of today have pretty much led to the major issue, which I think all of us face across constituencies, is really how are we dealing with the product, not just the product at the highest level in terms of a hotel or a villa, or an Airbnb, but how are we dealing with the heritage products? How are we dealing with the things that, in a sense, are not necessarily on the radar? Minister, you would have indicated that the studies that are being done, they often look at the expenditure through the credit card transaction. What I think we are all seeing in these estimates is that while those numbers will reveal a certain type of spend by perhaps a certain type of visitor, the whole issue of research and product development should also tell us a story that we are also equally investing in those unique products, those unique niche areas which are actually under the radar. And while I look at the estimates, I can only see, I think it is about 525,000 in the budget for professional services under the research and product development unit. Now, with all that has been said, if we are making so much money from tourism in terms of our earnings, it would suggest to me that we ought to be creating some kind of fund that specifically goes after those niche experiences that our tourists are coming to Barbados for. So for instance, the minister's next to me, we were having our side conversation while the discussion was going on. So things like the experience of the breadfruit bowl. I don't know that that is on anybody's radar, but the truth is that when you bring tourists to Barbados and you carry them there to be able to explain that breadfruit is, you know, one of our local superfoods, and you see the different ranges of the way in which breadfruit can be prepared, there is an excitement in not only telling the story, but also eating the delicacy as well. That is an experience. So I can then go to Cuz in Bay Street. The ministers were referencing the fact that, again, if you go online and you put in Cuz, you will see everybody talking about the fish cutter with the cheese. Are we doing enough for those types of niche experiences to be able to say that 525,000 in expenditure under this particular head is meeting the targets in terms of being able to truly develop product. Now, I know, Minister, you are saying that we have the linkages committee, but I feel almost as though we need to be making some decisions right away, or at least be able to create the funds that can tap into those niche areas that people are experiencing now, but are not, as in a sense, attracting the expenditure through the credit card transactions. We need to be a bit more deliberate, and I would have liked to see within the estimates that type of deliberate exercise being taken with the numbers to be able to show us exactly how we were going to build out those sectors. The off-roading experiences, how are we tapping into those? The Gully project in the Ministry of the Environment, how are we working with those types of projects? How are we going to the crabbing experience in the Honourable Member for St. Andrews constituency? These are things that are on the radar for our tourists. But unless these estimates are reflecting a deliberate exercise to be able to tap into these businesses and develop these areas, then I would like you to perhaps show me exactly where that expenditure is taking place. Not what you intend to do, but either what you have already created in terms of these niche experiences, but also what you intend to do in the future with these estimates for this financial year.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. You will hear from time to time, from the time I joined the ministry as a Minister of Tourism and International Transport, but that I've often made the point that one of my core objectives is to ensure that tourism not trickle down, but flow through. I'm, from where I sit, I'm quite overjoyed with the fact that you're seeing, for example, if I might use one example, oysters being populated and people earning well. If you look, for example, at Caboose and in the north of the island, if you look, for example, at the taxi drivers and operators, there's no, because if you use cash, like I said, we don't have a sense of reporting. The day we move now to credit card transactions, we have an opportunity where we can measure all those transactions. Truth be told, even though we are earning as much as I said that we've earned from the tourism sector, we're earning more because we don't capture that, because if it's a cash transaction, we're not capturing that. With respect to the product, whenever we travel, we always make it a point to promote Barbados as a destination. But beyond promoting Barbados as a destination, what appeals to that destination, and what are the core factors that our experience would evolve and would entice a person who's living outside of Barbados to visit Barbados. In respect of the budgeted amounts, you will note, yes, that we will have money put aside. For example, we've invested in the prior financial year and certainly this financial year in a number of studies on the professional services board PS. Those studies, we also are working with international institutions, with offices here in Barbados to develop more studies for us. And even though we don't have it inside the estimates, we are working with a number of multilateral agencies with offices located right here in Bridgetown to promote our tourism value product. There is a tourism value proposition. The tourism value chain benefits from it, but I'm confident that the work that we continue to do within the ministry and the support that we're getting from other agencies, targeted within the studies, for example, you mentioned the Gullies project, but within the Trove project, and I have to double check if I did take that to the Cabinet of Barbados. I think I did. I did, PS reminds me. But within that study, we have explored a number of other opportunities that can really go into the community and create entrepreneurs from within the community who could also benefit from the not only tourists who come here, but benefit from the spend. But because we don't have that mechanism to measure others who are within the sector, it is difficult. But suffice to say, I'm confident the path we are going with respect to the programs that we have planned out Execution is always critical, execution is always key, and I'm always all over the ministry with respect to execution, and we are confident that Barbados will begin to see the benefits of what we're doing with respect to our studies. And the good thing as a policy decision, when you're into a ministry, once you take the policy decisions early, you get the necessary data through studies, you execute, then the country will begin to benefit. And we believe that that will not only enhance product, not only contribute to increased earnings, but also will allow those within the tourism sector to benefit. And I remain faithful to my narrative that tourism must pour through, flow through to ordinary Barbadians, and that will always be my mandate.
Thank you, Minister. No further questions.
Thank you. Honourable Member, you have 5 minutes to wrap up the head. I'm sorry, Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The first question is really, I'm laughing to try to ease the tension in my head. The first one is really a follow-on from the original one I asked. We were talking about heritage, and the officer spoke to membership of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, and there was subsequent discussion about World Heritage properties or sites, as we sometimes refer to them. My question to the minister, to his officers, given your membership on the Council of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, what are you advocating for as the next possible sites, possible inscriptions in the register or whatever it is that UNESCO refers to it as for World Heritage properties? And Mr. Chair, I have another question, which is not related, but I don't think anybody else is asking questions, so I'll ask it after this one.
Right, Honourable Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Honourable Member. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's more a matter for culture as it relates to UNESCO heritage sites and so on. That does not sit squarely within the ministry or exclusively with the National Trust. But it's a question that it should be directed to culture. But I'll ask the PS to weigh in if she wants to. Right. So we have the view that that should be held in culture.
So let me clarify. I asked the question in the context of your membership on the council. So I'm not asking what the museum is pushing. I'm asking what your ministry, I assume that because you are on the council, that you're making input in the meetings and that, you know, there is some understanding of, you're put in a position. My question is not what the museum is doing, but what it is that the ministry thinks, the direction that the museum should go in. I know I've heard a number of different things. I've heard about Rock Hall. I've heard the story of Sugar and Rum. I heard about Spike Stone. I think I heard about a couple of others. But what would be the priority for the Ministry of Tourism?
All right, PS will speak to the matter.
As mentioned before, heritage and culture is an important plank of us telling Barbados. It is who we are. So when we invite persons to come and enjoy this destination, we're inviting them to come and experience what is Barbadiana. What makes a Barbadian a Bajan? So when we work with the National Trust, part of our remit is to make sure that we remain, it remains frontal to them, that we do not lose the heritage and culture that makes us who we are, and that is expressed through the architecture of the buildings, it's expressed in food, it is expressed in even in language, how we speak, and so on. So there is a strong relationship, certainly with the work that we do and what culture does, and, excuse me, what we expect the national trust to be supportive of the work to make sure that they also become part of the voice in communicating the importance in preserving our national history through the buildings, those buildings that we have identified that are critical and important to our heritage, and certainly in helping us to tell the story of what the history of these buildings, and share that story with our visitors when they join us. So we would also want to have their voices at the table when it comes to development, particularly in areas that where you may be developing a building that is of national heritage or significance to the country. We would want to have them participate and make sure that they bring a strong voice to the table to help us share that with other stakeholders, whether it is the developers who may be looking to construct and build in Barbados, whether it's a tourism accommodation or others. So we want to have them at the table as a strong voice to assist the ministry in making sure that heritage and tourism remains one of our strong elements in selling Barbados, because tourism cannot exist, in my mind, unless the heritage and culture remains a significant part of the story that we tell. So they're in there as a strong voice, a strong partner, and we value certainly their input into the work that we are doing in the ministry. So it is from that perspective, when we sit at the table with them, is to make sure that we maintain that relationship, we maintain having them in as a strong voice, and also to help us share the story and tell the story about culture and heritage.
Through Mr. Chair, the question I had was very, very specific to World Heritage property inscriptions. What I wanted to find out was, and I maybe should ask it a different way then, does the ministry have a perspective on what the next inscriptions on the UNESCO list should be? I asked the question based on your membership on the committee of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society. So I understand everything you said about, or you repeated really, about heritage and all that stuff, but this is specific to UNESCO inscription. Does the ministry have a perspective? If no, it's not a problem, all right? But I just wanted to know if you had a perspective, given that you felt so strongly about heritage.
PS wants to respond, thanks.
Sir, no, I'm not aware, and Director Research and Planning, as well as Ms. Pollard, can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure at this time that there have been another set of buildings identified, or the next step has been identified in the second iteration of buildings that you would want to have listed as part of the UNESCO inscription. So if I'm misspeaking, I would ask Ms. Pollard or Ms. Nicole Allen to interject here.
Thank you, PS, and thank you, Minister Jordan, for the question. The last that we were aware was surrounding the story of sugar and rum, but as the minister has said, certainly that is a matter that will be decided upon by the Ministry of Culture under the ambit of its Barbados World Heritage Committee. What I will want to say, though, now that I have the opportunity to speak on the floor, is that I don't see tourism as foisting its opinion to the extent that we must have our way. What I take away from our collaborations with these organizations is an acceptance and recognition that there's a nexus that exists between tourism and cultural heritage. I would even go as far as saying that there's a symbiotic relationship that exists between culture and tourism. And from that perspective, that is one of what I see as one of the key benefits of us sitting on these various committees and providing our input. But to circle right back to your question, it is best answered through the Barbados World Heritage Committee.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to prolong the discussion on this. Only to say, though, that I never suggested, I hope it didn't come over that way, that tourism ought to foist, and that was the word that was used, its opinions on the museum or the World Heritage Committee. I simply asked for a perspective. Maybe I use a different word next time. The real question I had, though, had to do with something that we've been talking about for quite some time. I didn't hear the minister's opening remarks, so I don't know if it was covered. If it was, I apologize. But we were talking about spend, we were talking about a number of things. One of the issues that has come up, this is now decades, the matter of tourism satellite accounting to recognize the full impact. So we talk about visitor spend. I know earlier this morning we talked a lot about linkages, but that matter of tourism satellite accounting. My question is there an update? Has it been implemented? Are we still working on it? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I'll ask the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry to respond to you. Yes.
Thank you, Minister. The Ministry has engaged, because we recognize that this has been a bit of a vexing issue for us. We want to be able to report not just on top-level numbers, so to speak, but to be able to give you a disaggregation of contribution in tourism or how other subsectors also contribute towards tourism. And that's why we undertook in this financial year, we actually sought assistance from one of our partners, international partners, and they have facilitated technical cooperation for the ministry to pursue the development of the tourism satellite account. Thus far in the process, we have circulated terms of reference, and that has been placed within the public domain to invite proposals to do so. And we are now at the stage of evaluating those proposals along with the international organization that is providing us with the technical cooperation with a view to contracting the consultant to help us to do that work. That is pretty much part of our work program for this year, and that, what I've described is the stages that we are at. The ministry is also contemplating the putting in place a steering committee where we want to have some of the brains in economics, some of our partners who might have retired, that we believe that can come back and help us steer this important piece of work, that we get the best out of it. We recognize that the first iteration will be embryonic, so to speak, because it will take a series of iterations in developing the tourism satellite account to give you one that is really of significance, because this process will help us to determine and zero in on how data is collected, because oftentimes data may not be in the form that we would want for the satellite account. So then going through this process would help us to refine how data is collected, what type of data is collected, the type of assistance or capacity building that maybe need to put in place at the various agencies that collect the data to allow that information then to filter through to the national satellite account. So that's where we are in terms of the progress of that work.
Thank you very much. I am very pleased to hear that. I think it is important work, particularly because there is not a full sense of the contribution of tourism to the national economy. We talk about various sectors, and for example, we refer to the significant work happening in construction, but the minister spoke to the fact that a lot of that work is tourism related. We talk about leakages. We don't talk about the fact that because of the expanded airlift, then the locating of business people here, even if they're running businesses abroad, is facilitated because of that expanded airlift. And I think it's important that we tell the story. I think is the word or the term that the member for Christchurch South used. Tell this story, and you can only tell that full story if you have the satellite account and are really able to share. But thank you very much.
Honourable Minister, you may now wrap up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me thank honourable members for the questions they posed and recommendations made. We have made a note of those recommendations, and obviously we will take them back to our ministry, and we will, of course, make the necessary engagements. We will, going forward in this year, focus a lot on our capital expenditure projects. Capital expenditure projects would relate not only to the Barbados Port Inc. at the Grand Adams International Airport, but also to the International Transport Division. We will move at a pace to ensure that we execute these projects. We're executing them because they have a direct relationship with technology, and we also have to ensure that we engineer these projects in the shortest possible time so the country can continue to benefit. We are going to continue our focus on emerging markets. It is very necessary that we focus on emerging markets to continue to grow our tourism sector. The branding of Barbados is also critical to us, and how we focus on the branding, protecting our core elements and ensuring that the Barbados brand remains exceptionally strong in the marketplace. We will continue with our program of route expansion. We will continue to work with the market directors in our respective markets, and also working with the ministry to ensure that we devise the appropriate strategies and policies to build on our successes thus far. There's still a lot of work to be done within the ministry, but I'm confident that over the certain period that I've had the opportunity to lead the ministry, we've made remarkable progress. We've attained some of our goals, and we will continue to ensure that we continue to meet those goals that are critical for the success of the tourism sector. I want to take this opportunity as well to thank the team here at the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport, the associated agencies within the portfolio, and certainly all of those who contribute to the tourism sector for helping us to accomplish what we have accomplished thus far. As I indicated, there's still a lot of work to be done, but we believe that laser-like focus will continue on this ministry. We make it look as though it is very easy work, but I must tell you and tell all of those who obviously don't know the intricacies of the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport, that it is a mammoth task. It is a big job at hand. And notwithstanding that, whenever we call on the officers within the ministry and associated agencies to ensure that they contribute, that they do so, the fact that they continue to do what they do, the fact that they continue to come to work and work hard is not only a contributing factor to their patriotism as Barbadians, but also as a people who believe that we can build out the tourism sector and make it even better. We will continue to drive our earnings from the sector. We will continue to ensure that those who benefit from the sector, that we continue to flow through in the tourism sector so that people, the ordinary man or woman, as some people refer to them, will continue to benefit from the sector. So I know that the staff, and they always tell me I work them very hard, and they will smile and they will say that as well publicly. But I really want to say thank you. It is never easy when you have to be in a ministry, when you have to travel, when you have to get up at some, as Barbadians will say, ungodly hours. Sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning to catch a plane, to get back home and to crisscross airports. When you have to get out of the aircraft when it's extremely cold, when you have to go through snow, when you have to, if you go into Dallas in the heat, in the sweltering heat, and you get off and the heat hits in your chest, we do all of that. And it has happened. We do all of that because we believe that we have to build out tourism. It is a very competitive space, and as a result, it requires not only strategic thinking, but it also requires tactical initiatives as we continue to build the tourism. So we will come to work, Mr. Chairman, as a team, and we will continue to build out the tourism industry for all Barbadians. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I ask that Head 27 stand for.
The question is that Head 27 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
Beg second that.
The question is that I do not report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The Chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until tomorrow, the 11th of March at 10 a.m.
The question is that this Honourable Chairman will be suspended until tomorrow, the 11th day of March, 2026 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This Honourable Chairman stands suspended until tomorrow, 11th of March, 2026 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.